The first-class cabin smelled faintly of leather, citrus wipes, and brewed coffee as passengers settled into their seats. Overhead bins closed with soft thuds, and the hum of the aircraft felt distant and controlled. A black man in a tailored charcoal suit sat by the window, reviewing messages on his phone. His posture was calm, deliberate, the kind that came from years of confidence earned quietly. He had boarded early, greeted the crew politely, and taken his seat without drawing attention. When the flight attendant reached his row with the service cart, she barely slowed. She offered wine to the woman across the aisle, sparkling water to the man ahead, and a warm smile to each. When she reached him, she hesitated, glanced at his seat number, then pushed the cart forward. "Excuse me," he said gently. "May I see the menu?" She looked back with a practiced expression. "First-class dining will begin shortly," she replied. "For now, we're serving beverages, I understand," he said. "I was asking about the meal options." She frowned, scanning him quickly. "Sir, the luxury meals are reserved for select first-class guests." He blinked once. "I am in first class." She gave a thin smile. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." The surrounding seats went quiet. A few passengers pretended not to listen, though their eyes drifted over their screens. The man felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Not anger yet, but recognition. He had felt this moment before. The pause where someone decided who he was without asking. "I'm not trying to make anything difficult," he said evenly. "I'd just like the same service as everyone else here." The attendant's smile faded. "I'll come back later," she said, already turning the cart away. He watched her go, jaw set, hands resting calmly on the armrests. He did not raise his voice. He did not stand. He simply waited. 10 minutes passed. The cart returned. The attendant stopped for the other passengers again, offering plated appetizers and drinks. When she reached his row, she skipped him once more. "Ma'am," he said, louder now, though still controlled. She sighed audibly. "Sir, I told you, these meals are not for who?" he asked quietly. She froze. "For who?" he repeated, looking directly at her. A man 2 rows back leaned forward. Interest peaked. Another passenger across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. "I'm calling the lead," the attendant snapped, pushing the cart away. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He tapped once, then lifted it to his ear. "Please connect me," he said softly. When the lead attendant arrived, the first attendant spoke quickly, defensively, explaining that a passenger was demanding services he wasn't entitled to. The lead looked from her to the man, then down at the manifest on her tablet. "Sir," the lead said cautiously, "may I see your boarding pass?" He handed it over without comment. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she read the name. She looked up again, this time with a different expression. "I'm so sorry," she said. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding." "There was," he replied, "but it wasn't mine." The cabin felt tense, as if the air pressure had shifted. The first attendant's face flushed. "I didn't know," she muttered. "That's the problem," he said calmly. "You didn't know, and you didn't ask." The lead attendant nodded. "Your meal will be served immediately." "No," he said. "I want to understand why it wasn't offered in the first place." Silence. The first attendant opened her mouth, then closed it. Words failed her. "I fly this airline often," he continued. "I pay for first class. I expect the service advertised. What I received was something else." A man behind him spoke up. "He's right," he said. "I saw the whole thing." The lead attendant swallowed. "Sir, we take these matters seriously." "I hope so," the man replied, "because this isn't about food." He leaned back, eyes steady. "It's about how easily you decided I didn't belong." The first attendant looked down, arms crossed tightly. The man ended his call and placed the phone face down on the tray table. "By the way," he added, almost casually, "I'm on the board." The words landed heavily. "The board?" the lead asked. "Of this airline," he clarified. The color drained from the first attendant's face. Passengers murmured openly now. A woman gasped softly. Someone whispered, "Oh my God. I didn't mention it earlier because it shouldn't matter." The man continued. "Service should be equal regardless. But since it seems titles are what get attention here, I thought I'd clarify." The lead attendant straightened immediately. "Sir, I sincerely apologize. "This does not reflect our standards. It reflects something," he said, "and I intend to address it." The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom moments later, announcing a slight delay due to a cabin issue. Heads turned. The tension thickened. The lead attendant whispered to the first attendant, then asked her to step aside. The woman walked away stiffly, eyes fixed on the floor. A fresh tray was brought, the finest meal on offer, arranged carefully. The man nodded politely but did not touch it yet. "Please," the lead said softly. "Allow us to make this right." He looked around the cabin, at the faces watching him. Some held guilt, others relief. "I will eat," he said, "but understand this. I don't want anyone else treated the way I was." The lead nodded vigorously. As the flight continued, the story traveled quietly through the cabin. Passengers glanced at him with new awareness. He felt no satisfaction, only resolve. When they landed, the man was met at the gate by senior staff. Apologies were offered, assurances made. The first attendant was removed from duty pending review. Later, in the privacy of a quiet lounge, the man reflected on the incident. He knew his position had changed the outcome. That knowledge weighed on him. He thought of all the people without titles, without power, who endured the same treatment and left unheard. That night, he drafted a proposal: mandatory training, anonymous reporting, clear accountability. Not statements, but systems. At the next board meeting, he told the story himself. He did not embellish, he did not soften it. He described the silence, the dismissal, the casual assumption. Some members shifted uncomfortably, others nodded. "This is why representation matters," he concluded. "Not to punish, but to prevent." The motion passed unanimously. Months later, he boarded another flight. The service was smooth, respectful, ordinary, as it should be. When the attendant offered him the menu, she smiled warmly, unaware of who he was beyond the passenger. He smiled back, grateful not for recognition, but for change. The next morning, news of the incident began circulating quietly inside the company. Emails passed between departments, careful in language but urgent in tone. Customer relations flagged the flight. Human resources requested statements. Training managers reviewed footage and logs. What had happened at 30,000 feet refused to stay contained. The man watched none of it unfold directly. He spent the day in meetings unrelated to the airline, but his mind returned often to the moment the cart rolled past him. It was never the loud injustices that lingered. He knew it was the small ones, the moments that could be denied, reframed, minimized. That afternoon, he received a message from a junior employee he had mentored years ago. She thanked him for speaking up. She told him she had experienced something similar as a passenger once and had stayed silent. Reading her words, he felt both pride and sadness. Change, he realized, was slow because silence was common. At home that evening, he called his mother. She listened without interrupting, as she always did. When he finished, she said she was proud of him, not for the authority he carried, but for the restraint he showed. "Who made them listen without becoming what they expected you to be," she said. The following week, the airline released a public statement. It acknowledged a failure in service and promised corrective action. Some praised it, others dismissed it as routine. The man read it once and set it aside. Words mattered less than what followed. Training sessions were redesigned. Scenarios changed. Assumptions were challenged explicitly. Employees were asked not just how to serve, but why bias slipped in unnoticed. It was uncomfortable work. Some resisted, others leaned in. One attendant, newly hired, later wrote that the training made her reconsider moments she had brushed off before. She realized how quickly she judged passengers based on appearance, how often she relied on patterns instead of presence. The lesson stayed with her. Months passed. The incident faded from headlines, but not from memory. The man continued flying, continued working, continued living in the space between visibility and invisibility that he had always known. On a different route, he noticed a young black couple seated in first class, their excitement barely contained. When service began, the attendant greeted them warmly, explained options carefully, and asked if they had questions. The man watched quietly, hoping it meant something had shifted. After landing, he passed the attendant and thanked her for her professionalism. She smiled, unaware of the weight of the gratitude. Later that year, at a conference on corporate responsibility, he was asked to speak. He told the story again, not as an accusation, but as a case study. He spoke about how bias often hid behind procedure, and how power could either reinforce it or dismantle it. A young man in the audience approached him afterward. He said he worked in customer service and had never thought about how his assumptions shaped his behavior. "I will now," he said simply. That, the man thought, was enough. On another flight, turbulence shook the cabin briefly. Passengers gasped, then laughed nervously when it passed. The man looked around, seeing fear, relief, humanity shared in a small moment. He wondered how different the world might feel if people extended that same shared humanity beyond moments of danger. As the plane descended, he reflected on how easily comfort could turn into entitlement, how easily authority could turn into dismissal. He knew there would be other incidents, other flights, other quiet harms, but he also knew that each confrontation, handled with clarity and dignity, bent the arc slightly. When the wheels touched down, he felt a familiar sense of closure. Not triumph, not anger, just resolve. He gathered his things, nodded to the crew, and stepped into the aisle with the rest of the passengers. One among many, carrying a lesson that would travel farther than he ever could. Outside the terminal, sunlight poured through glass walls, ordinary and bright. The man paused for a moment, watching travelers rush past with suitcases and coffee cups, each carrying unseen stories. He knew his own would not end here. It would surface again in meetings, in policies, in conversations where discomfort was necessary. He adjusted his jacket and walked forward, resolved to keep asking questions, to keep insisting on fairness, even when it was inconvenient. Because progress, he understood, was not made by grand gestures alone, but by refusing to accept small injustices as normal. And that refusal, repeated often enough, could change the way the world moved, one flight at a time. He believed that accountability was not about punishment, but about awareness. If people learned to pause, to question their instincts, to see individuals instead of categories, fewer moments like his would occur. With that thought steady in his mind, he merged into the crowd, another traveler, moving forward, carrying quiet determination rather than bitterness, committed to shaping change through presence, patience, and persistence wherever his journey took him next. The engines quieted behind him, but the lessons stayed loud, echoing in choices yet to be made. He walked on, steady and certain, knowing dignity should never require proof or permission from anyone. It belonged to everyone, always.